That's the beauty of actually attending. All right. So yeah, 5,350 for a house that's worth 385. Okay. It's not uncommon these days to pay more than that, right? 400,000-500,000. In fact, you know when you win like the $1 million home with the lottery, like the health sciences $1 million home, or I think now it's almost $2 million home, I am pretty sure you have to pay the land transfer taxes on that. So it's probably going to be like $14,000 or something that you have to pay. And a lot of people can't even afford that part, right, to pay the land transfer tax. You know what often ends up happening with this amount is you throw it onto your mortgage. So you say, you know, I borrowed 385, you're just going to add that to it, and then people just finance the entire thing. But if you don't want that, you need to save this up in addition to what you've already saved up. What's the minimum down payment, percentage-wise? It's one hand, 5%, right? 5%. And on top of that, I would suggest add another 2% for any additional costs, like lawyer fees, land transfer tax, all that. So 7% is what you should be saving up for. Okay? All right, page 55. Let's just, this is honestly test material here. What percentage of the house would this be? Like how much would this be as a percentage compared to the price of the house? And you do this just like your test score. You say like, what have I got? And what's the total out of? In this case, it's 385. So let's just go figure that out at the bottom here. It's complete aside here, right? Determine land transfer tax. Caden, could you turn off the front lights for me? As a percentage. Thank you. Determine the land transfer tax as a percentage. So all you would need to do is take the amount you've calculated, divide it by 385,000, and then multiply that by 100. I don't even know what that is right now. That'd be 1.39%. 1.39 rounded. So almost 2%, well, closer. So that's why I'm just saying to be safe, it's better to save up an additional 2%, because I'm going to show you yet there's lawyer fees, there's the house inspection fee if you choose to go ahead with it, which I would strongly recommend you do. Sometimes the inspectors give you a choice, like this is the full package, $500, but if you only want me to check for 3 major things, it's $300. If you want me to check for 4 things, it's $400. So it's kind of like a package deal or individualized if you want to. Okay. So heads up here. This house price, I started with it. This is over 200,000. Keep that in mind. So anything over 200,000 gets taxed 2%, but anything in between we have to go by this scale. So we actually fully used up this scale. We subtracted 30K, 60K, 60K, and then 50K, right? We went through all of that, 30, 60, 60, 50, and then whatever was over got taxed 2%. I'm going to match these colors with what we did here. So if you did that yesterday, I'm just going to show you the 30K happened here, and then the next 60,000 happened there, and the next 60 again, right there, and then the 50K, sorry you can't see that, the 50K right here happened there. So I actually have to use up the entire scale, okay, for this calculation. But you won't always have to do that, because sometimes the house price will be less than 200K. It will be somewhere in between, somewhere in here, not surpassing 200,000, okay? And I'm going to show you now how we work that, okay? How do we deal with that situation? So here we go. 56. Go with me to 56. If you rather want this table here, or like this line on your study sheet instead of this table, that is fine. because usually the province gives you this table when it's land transfer tax calculation time. If you do the line, I'm very okay with it. Just make sure that where the percentages are, you also tell yourself what it is as a decimal, because that is, unfortunately, this is where a lot of students have issues with, like, not converting these correctly. And so the work is right, but you, in essence, it's right, but you're making mistakes here. Okay, so just make sure you keep that in mind. Okay, so calculate the land transfer tax. You should immediately know what that is, right? It's what we're about to do. Land transfer tax, there's no formula. There's just the steps that I showed you. For a house worth $135,000, okay? Note less than 200K. Okay, that's a big important note to put down, because so you deal with it a little differently than the first example I did with you. So we start the same way, 135, okay? And we go through these amounts here. So the first amount you're going to subtract is 30,000, and on that we don't pay any property land transfer tax, sorry. So that's 0 right away. And I will have a calculator here. You know, I applaud you for mental math, right? But on the exam, the test on the exam, please don't show off your mental math skills, because even if you're off by a little bit, it just affects everything else. Okay? So you want to go 135 minus 35,000, that's 105, and use mental math to confirm what you're doing, right? The next amount is 60,000, and we can subtract 60,000 because we have 105 to still be taxed. So this we will multiply by 0.005. Okay. We will find out later. So I go 60,000 away from that. I'm left with 45,000. Can I subtract the next chunk from this? I cannot, right? It would be a negative. So you stop there. You no longer subtract. But you are now in this category right here, in the 1% taxation territory, right? This is 0.5. So you will tax this 0.01. Like whatever remains, you tax it 1%, because that's the next tax bracket, and we'll figure that out in a bit. And maybe watch me do this before you write this down, but you could say, right, oh, the next one would be 60,000, and I cannot do that because it would be negative. So if that helps you, right, negative can't be, okay? Can't be negative. So you wouldn't subtract. So if you cannot subtract the full amount of the next bracket, you stop. And just remember, you were at 0.5, now you're at 1%. So I'm just going to calculate this. 45,000 times 0.01, that's $450. And then 60,000 times 0.005. Some of you will memorize these amounts. That's $300. And then 0 we've already determined. So you can tell this is going to be a lot less. Okay, so land transfer tax here would be 0 plus 300. It's okay to omit the 0. I'm just showing you that I'm adding up all these amounts. So land transfer tax for this house is just $750. So it's not a whole lot. Okay. And so if you go back 20, 25 years ago, a house for $135,000 was actually a pretty nice house. Okay, so you paid very little land transfer tax. But ever since, like I would say, before COVID and after COVID specifically, a lot of the houses are much more than $135,000 these days. So that's how the government started collecting a lot more money, right? Offering a, no, I'm not gonna diss the government here, because they pay my salary, right? So I have to be careful. All right, I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna ask you to try the next two based on the notes we already have. If you, I'm just gonna do this. I'm doing this for you, the highlighting part, right? Because remember, this is orange. I subtracted the orange there. This second part was green for me. I took that away. And then the third one would have been pink. And the pink part, right? The amount in this chunk gets taxed 1%. 20. So that's where you stop in this case. You don't continue if it's going to be a negative answer. Okay? So try example 3. Try example 4. See how it goes for you. I will go over it, and then we will give you a few more to try. Okay. So just to clarify the whole subtracting, multiplying thing. So what I'm doing is I'm first of all seeing, okay, how many chunks are filled up until I'm maybe with a little bit left over in a different tier. That is the number one thing that I'm trying to do. That's where the subtracting comes in. Because as long as I can subtract the amounts that pertain to that bracket, right, I'm going to keep doing it. Minus 30,000. Okay, there's some left over. Minus 60,000. Okay, there's some left over. Minus 60,000. Oh, there's still some left over. And that leftover might be in that next category that you're in. Okay? So that's what's happening here. So that's where the subtraction comes in. The multiplication just says that for the first 30K, 0 taxes. For the next 60K, you pay 0.5%, right? And then you pay 1% for the next 60 and so forth. So that's where the multiplication comes in. We're actually figuring out how much money are we paying into each of these categories, these brackets. Okay? So let's try that one more time. Just focus on the explanation. Even if you got the right answer, right now that is important, of course, but let's also understand what we're doing. So in this case, 190,000. I'm going to go and subtract the 30,000. I know I pay 0 on that. I'm not even going to bother multiplying it by 0 because it is 0. Then you're left with 160,000. The next bracket is 60. Okay, that gets taxed 0.5%, which is the equivalent of 0.005. It's actually the amount I'm subtracting that I'm multiplying. That is something you need to make sure you understand. So then I'm left with 100,000. The next bracket to subtract is 60,000 again, and I can do so. Okay, this gets taxed 1%. Okay, it spills over, and I have 40,000 left here. I cannot subtract the 50,000 from it, right? Because then I'll be in the negatives. That just tells me that I'm not completely filling in that category. So these 40. Let me go to my line again. The 40,000 are technically filling up almost this whole thing. They're up to here. But the 40,000 gets taxed 1.5%. That's something you need to understand. Okay? So it's kind of weird. You're like, well, how come it's like times and then it's times again right away? It is because of what I just tried to explain to you, that 40,000 are still taxed 1.5%. We no longer subtract. And then you just do the math. This is 300 bucks. This is 600 bucks. This is 7? No. 600 as well, right? Yeah, 600, sorry. So it happens to be 600 as well. And so here you go. So your land transfer tax is 3 plus 6 plus 6. So that's $1,500 that you would pay for a house that's worth 190. Okay? I'll just say this one more time. Don't worry about a down payment ever. The government still charges you on the actual value of the house. You can pay it off cash. You can say, hey, I have the whole thing. Here, boom. They'll still tax you on what the property is worth. Okay, so the down payment doesn't really save you money there. You can't escape it. It is what it is. Okay? All right, let's keep going. A land transfer tax of $225. I'll give you the long version and I'll give you a short version of this. Something I want you to notice is this is over 200K. If you notice that a house is worth more than 200,000, there's actually a shortcut for calculating this one. Only do it if you're very comfortable with it, the shortcut. Okay, if you're not comfortable with it, stick with my plan, it'll work every time. 225,000 minus 30. That gets 0. Right? I'm left with 195. Minus 60. That gets taxed 0.5%. Subtract that, you're left with 135. You got to subtract 60 again. That gets taxed 1%. Keep going. I'm left with 75,000. I can still subtract. The next amount would be 50,000. That gets taxed 1.5%, which is 0.015. Then you're left with 25,000. What is that taxed? That anything past the, if you go through your whole scale, anything over $200,000 gets taxed 2%. Okay. So in this case, you go through your whole scale, and whatever is remaining gets taxed 2%. So here we go. After a while, you just memorize these numbers if you fill them out. This is 750, and this is 500 bucks. Okay. And now you add up these numbers here. So land transfer tax is 300 plus 600, 750 plus 500, and that would be 2150. So as soon as you're 200,000 and up, it goes up significantly, the amount that you will owe. Okay. This is a shortcut. I didn't leave a whole lot of room for the shortcut, but I'll show you here. Over 200K shortcut. For the first 200K, there's actually, you can actually figure out how much you pay every time. Watch this. If you go, because if it's over 200K, you're gonna have to go through these steps for sure. What does that add up to? 3 and 6, that's 900. And 750 is how much? 1650, right? So you can already, you know it's gonna be 1650 for sure, plus whatever you're over by. So in this case, you're over by 25,000. And you're gonna multiply that by 0.02, which is 500 bucks. So you could have saved yourself all of this and just say, hey, it's 1650 for sure, plus how much are you over by? In this case, 25,000. You multiply that by 0.02 to get the 500. So total would be 1650 plus 500, and that is 2150. This only works if you're over 200,000, okay? So if the house is under 200,000, then you have to kind of go through these steps for that to work. So it's always 1650 if you fill up 200,000. So let's say this would have been a $300,000 home, right? You know you're going to pay 1650 for the first 200K, and this would have been 100K, right? You're over by 100,000 times 0.02. What would that be? Two grand? That'd be $2,000 plus the 1650. So that'd be 3650. Right? So if you can wrap your head around it, you may use it. Just be careful. Just be careful when to use it. Maybe this is just to verify what you're doing is correct. I'm trying to think what happened in the past, okay, on exams. I know that 1 year, I'm going to come back to this if you're writing this down. I'll come back to it. 1 year, the exam had this chart there, and they had like boxes blank there for you to actually fill in the amounts that we're calculating here, to fill them in the box, but they said it's okay to just do it on the side as well. So most of my students just did this on the side and came up with their land transfer tax, and it was just fine. But don't let that throw you off if that ever happens, right? Like sometimes they have a different format. Just be smart about it. Okay. Can you go to 57 here? And this table is what I'm going to kind of focus on. I want you to try those numbers because I strategically picked those numbers. So if a property were to be $27,999 and you're like, when is that ever going to happen? It could be a piece of property, like an empty lot way outside the city. It could still be this much. So even if you buy an empty lot, you still pay land transfer tax. Okay? So figure out what it is for $27,999. What would it be, by the way? It's a 0 because it's under 30,000, so you don't even have to do any math there. I gave it away, I shouldn't have, but right? And so every amount is kind of a weird amount, but if you follow my steps, you should be able to figure out the taxes. And it's gonna seem very low at times because these are very low amounts, and that's okay. I will post the answer key while you try these. So can you try this? And then I actually do want to start talking about property taxes today. Okay, so try them. I'll post the key.